Belle da Costa Greene teaches you the one lesson your job will never tell you. Your talent is not enough. You need expertise, you need people awareness, and you need to know yourself better than anyone in the room. I'm Tieska Jumbo, and I'm doing another book review on The Personal Librarian about Belle da Costa Greene, a Black woman who passed for white in the late 1800s and the early 1900s so that she could achieve status and access and take care of her family. So Belle was a career expert. She thrived in a time when most women did not, and definitely Black people did not. She was able to do both. She was able to make a name for herself. She is single-handedly responsible for the J.P. Morgan Library that still exists to this day in New York City. She did that in 3 ways. First, she knew her stuff. She was an expert in her field. 2, she knew the players. She knew all the dealers. She knew the museums, she knew the curators, she knew the high society people, she knew the people who were going to bid. She was well aware of all the players in her field. And third, she knew herself better than anybody else, which was very important because, like I said, she was passing for white. So she had to be well aware of everything about herself and her surroundings. She had to have her story rehearsed so that she was on top of her game at all times. Before we get into the 3 points, I want to share a passage from the book where her friends describe to her how famous she is and how well revered she is amongst women at the time. Katrina continues, "I hope this doesn't embarrass you, but many of the women I live and work with look to you as an example." I've heard that before, but I'm not sure why women think of me that way. You are one of the most successful career women of our day, commanding thousands of dollars in the art world with the backing of one of the world's most powerful men. And, I'm guessing, without any pressure to marry and have children. So her friends told her that it wasn't just them who were kind of watching her from the sidelines, but it was women all over the place who were looking at how she was maneuvering and negotiating and just rocking this world full of men and making a name for herself and standing out. But before she even got to the J.P. Morgan Library, I want to talk a little bit about how she even put herself in the position to be there. So she was working at Princeton. Here's a quick passage. "As I duck under a crenellated tower, I moderate my pace so I won't be breathless when I arrive. You are at Princeton University. You must take extra care working at that all-male institution. Be cautious. Never do anything to stand out. Even though she's nearly 60 miles away, Mama insinuates herself into my thoughts." So her first bit of education and training was being at Princeton, that all-male, all-white university, and holding her own and becoming an expert. And then during that period, she meets Mr. Morgan, but not J.P. Morgan. She meets his nephew, Junius. And so they develop a relationship through a shared love of ancient texts. I'm going to share a little bit more. While Mr. Junius Morgan is ostensibly a banker, he has generously donated dozens of ancient and medieval manuscripts to the university, which is why he also holds the titular position of Associate Head Librarian. I'm convinced that Miss Scott thinks any sort of relationship between us, even the cordial, professional one we share, is beneath him. Mr. Morgan, who I think of as Junius in the privacy of my own thoughts, knows that my zeal for the library's most valuable collection is nearly as intense as his own, and that none of my other tasks will stand in the way of the private viewing he has promised. We share a passion for the ancient Roman poet Virgil. The library houses 52 volumes of his poetry. My discussions with Junius about the dark voyages in the Aeneid and the Odyssey are some of the brightest moments in my days. While Junius admires Odysseus, I identify always with Aeneas, the Trojan refugee who desperately tries to fulfill his destiny in a world that holds no place for him. Aeneas was driven by duty, sacrificing for the good of others. So that's foretelling, because that's exactly what she's doing. She's sacrificing her identity for the good of her family. I'm going to move forward a little bit more. Curious, I turn away from the Virgil. Junius's placid face, always pleasant but always serious, has cracked open with a wide smile. It is a bit disconcerting, and as I lean away a little, I wonder what on earth is going on. And he fast forwards because he had told her about his uncle, J.P. Morgan. And then it says, Junius pauses for a moment before he answers. In a manner of speaking, I suppose he is in search of a new acquisition, he says with a knowing chuckle. I have recommended that he interview you for his newly created post of personal librarian. So Belle was able to get her career started at this library at Princeton, which was already a huge feat because, like I said, it was all male dominated and it was a white institution. Then she was able to forge this relationship with Junius Morgan and share this love of ancient texts because it's her passion, because it was something that she was very interested in and knowledgeable in. I'm sure that her passion shone through in these conversations with Mr. Morgan, such that he got her a private viewing of this collection. So her first feat was knowing her stuff. She knew her stuff well enough to get into Princeton. She knew her stuff to keep the company of somebody like Junius Morgan, who was an expert himself. So she set herself up for success by being an expert. In other ways, as she was more ingrained in the world of J.P. Morgan, she also shared her expertise. She was invited to a new exhibition, and the two curators stood back and wanted to know what she thought. They said, "So what do you think?" This time it's Mr. Steichen who asks. I turn back to the painting. As an art expert, I feel like I should comment on the groundbreaking way Matisse approaches the very traditional subject matter of the pastoral landscape, one I've seen over and over in classical and Renaissance paintings, but... I pause. But what? The men say together. I turn to them. To answer your question, I don't believe Matisse wants me to think, but to feel. The men give each other a relieved, hopeful glance. It seems you understand, Mr. Steichen says. So everywhere she went, she was able to speak at length about whatever it was that she was viewing within her sphere of understanding. So one of the things that is really critical in this period of time, especially because technology keeps moving forward, AI is taking over, and it's easy to become a generalist in a lot of different things because knowledge is everywhere. But mastery in a subject is still the thing that really sets you apart. And Belle demonstrated that exquisitely throughout her career. She was a master in her subject matter. The second thing is to know the players. So she demonstrated knowing the players in Mr. Morgan, in Mr. Junius Morgan, although she didn't have any ulterior motives. I don't think she ever thought that she would get to meet J.P. Morgan and definitely not be his librarian. But there were multiple times where you could see that she is studying the people around her. In one area, she is in a ballroom. She is out somewhere with Mr. Morgan or on his behalf. And this is what she says. I decide to study the guests' mannerisms and the way in which they interact. As I examine the women, I realize that their speech is accompanied by gentle touches. The flick of a fan on a man's shoulder or the light touch of a gloved finger on a gentleman's arm, and pointed glances, often sidelong. These women, old and young alike, available and taken, are flirting. Mama would never approve of these exchanges, but I see that in order to fit in, I may have to adapt. She begins to become a student of people. She is not just a student of art. She's not just a student of the manuscripts and the texts, but she is a student of people. She is learning the psychology of the society that she's around because that's not how she grew up. So she didn't have the formal training that a lot of the people in this high society did. And at one point she even asks at this same ball that she's at, she says, only once I'm inside the great hall do I feel safe from the butler's glare. Why didn't Mr. Morgan tell me that I'd need an escort? What else do I not know? This was her first event, and there were all kinds of things that she didn't know. Once she discovered that she didn't know a lot of things, she began to study everything around her, everything possible, so that she could set herself apart and so that she wouldn't be caught off guard. Because remember, she's a black woman passing as white. So she had to be hyper aware of everything, not just the subject matter, but the people around her, what they were thinking about her, how she was coming across, how she appeared. She had to be well aware of all these things in order to continue to be cautious and careful in her surroundings. She also had to know the players. She also used that strategy to help her win auctions and to continue to build the collection. There's another scene where she encounters two women. One of them is Mr. Morgan's daughter, who is not a fan of hers and who has suspicions about her ethnicity and tries to catch her out. And she comes into contact with this lady and her friend, and she knows that she's being probed, but because she knows that Anne does not like her, she's always ready for her. So in this scene, she says, I know what she's intimating by offering Cuba for our origins. I press my hand against my chest to calm myself and pretend it's a gesture of amusement. Cuba, I chuckle, as if I'm delighted by her words, even though inside I seethe. Oh no, but I would certainly love to visit that country one day. So she knows, because she knows who's around her. She knows that people are going to constantly probe her and try to catch her out, because she knows that Anne doesn't like her and that she is trying to trip her up. She steadies herself. She's prepared with the comeback. So I mentioned in another video how she uses language and how she's a master of kind of clapback sometimes. She's a master of clapback sometimes because she knows that she has to be on the ready. But in this situation, she's really aware of the people around her. She also knows the dealer. So there was a series of books that she wanted to get by the Caxtons, who were printers, and they were really responsible for printing a lot of works that we wouldn't otherwise have had. And she knew that bringing those Caxtons back to his collection would be like a major feat and set her up for further success. So she used her negotiating ability to bid before the auction even started so that she ensured that she won. And the English dealers of the time were really wowed by her ability to out-negotiate and outmaneuver them. And she was prepared when she finally got the biggest work that she promised him that she would get. She knew who else was going to be there. She had studied this man. She knew that he was a Westerner with a lot of money, and they were determined. She was determined that he wasn't going to win, and she kind of had the support of the other people in her circle because they didn't want this outsider to win. So she knew the players in the game, and she was able to dominate. She was well aware of who they were. So how do you take what Belle did and use it in your everyday situation? If you work in corporate America or you work with other people, you can take the opportunity to observe. So just as when Belle went to the event for the first time with Mr. Morgan, or on his behalf, and she was like, why didn't he tell me that I was supposed to come with a chaperone? And then after that, she started to look at the women and observe their mannerisms, and she learned that they were all flirting. You can do the same thing, not the flirting part, but just sitting back and observing the different relationships between the people at work. You can see who are the people who just talk a big game versus the people who actually get things done. You can see who are the people who actually have authority and have power. You can sit back and you can observe a lot of things. You can ask questions. People love to talk about themselves. So if you want to figure out who's who and who knows what, I would pinpoint specific people to talk to, just like Belle would go into these balls and she would get next to somebody and ask them questions and probe. I would do the same thing in my workplace. I would go and start to ask people questions. Just, hey, I'm really interested in what it is that you do. I've noticed that you have blah, 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 XYZ, or I saw that you were leading this project or this program, and I'm just curious about what's going on. Take that opportunity to learn and observe, see how other people are interacting with each other. And that's how you begin to know the players around you. You can be a student of not just your subject matter, but be a student of the people around you, the people who are in the area that you work in. And that's how you'll be able to know the players, just like Belle did. If your organization is an organization that uses a psychometric test like DISC or Gallup Clifton Strengths, which I'm a Gallup Clifton Strengths coach, so that's my favorite. So if you're in an organization that uses these profiles, if you have access to that information, or if people are willing to tell you, ask them what their profile is, and then you know what language they speak. You can use that information to figure out how to talk to them in a way that they understand, because everything boils down to communication, and we say that all the time. But you have an opportunity in learning how to communicate with somebody in a way that they understand once you get to know their personality a little bit more. So Belle started to learn Mr. Morgan's personality. She understood that even though he spoke in a gruff tone oftentimes, or he sounded disturbed, she started to learn what that meant and what it didn't mean. So she stopped being frustrated when he would speak roughly to her, because she understood that that's just the way that he talks. There were certain times when he would use different tones that she would kind of freeze and feel a little bit uncomfortable, because she knew that his tone was different than normal. She started to read him, and so she was able to maneuver around him and get a stronger relationship because she understood who she was dealing with. It's the same thing with Mr. Berenson and Anne and all the other characters that she interacted with in the book. book, she studied their mannerisms, she studied their movements, she studied their language so she could adapt and do the right thing for each situation. You can do the same thing too. It just takes time and patience and being observant and asking questions. And then the final point is that she had to know herself better than anybody else. So that's evidenced in the passage I shared where she ran into Anne and she challenged her origins. It was evidenced in her love affair with Mr. Berenson. She also knows what her loyalties are. So in a part of knowing herself, she knows that she's loyal to her family, but she also knows that she's loyal to Mr. Morgan and she's loyal to Mr. Berenson in the early days. They're invited to the Met and they're invited to see a sculpture before it's put on public display. And Mr. Berenson notices that it's not exactly what they think that it is, and he challenges them. So the curator, of course, is taken aback and is telling Mr. Berenson that he must be mistaken. And Belle is witnessing this whole thing, so she steps in. She says, "I have no wish to alienate a Met curator, but I cannot sit by and allow him to insult Bernard. Mr. Johnson," I say, "as you undoubtedly know, Renaissance artwork was the rediscovery of a classical design in art, particularly that of ancient Greek and Roman origin. In order to become an expert in his field, Mr. Berenson had to become an expert in both Greek and Roman antiquities, and given that he makes his home in Italy, I am guessing that he studies ancient Greek and Roman art in situ." She's willing to kind of stand 10 toes down for Mr. Berenson. She does the same thing with Mr. Morgan. There were a couple of times earlier in her experiences where a couple of people, kind of sidled beside her and tried to make little snide remarks or snarky remarks about Mr. Morgan. She's like, "Hold up, chill out. You're not just going to sit here in front of me and talk about my boss like that. You can take that somewhere else." So she was well aware of herself. She was well aware of her story, the rehearsed story that she had to have, so that regardless of what anybody tried to say, her story was all the same. My origins are Portuguese. My grandma lives in Portugal. And that's all that she would divulge. And she was well aware of her relationship with Mr. Morgan, her relationship with Berenson, and all of the things that she had to keep in mind and kind of keep balanced in order to ensure success. When it comes to knowing yourself, you can also use one of these profiles to help you understand how you think and how you process. Again, I prefer Gallup-Clifton strengths. So I know that my number one strength is relator. I prefer, when I'm in the workplace and in life generally, I prefer deep relationships with a few people. And so I'm very cautious about who I'm building relationships with in the workplace. But I know that it's important for me to have people that I trust in my team and in my working relationships in order for me to really thrive. I know that because my number 2 is achiever, that means I really like to get things done. So if I'm in a project that is very slow moving or doesn't have a lot of tangible things to do, I'm going to get bored. And so once you have a good understanding, a good vocabulary for yourself, you have really taken some time to be introspective, then you can also use that to your advantage. Begin to assess your own movement, your own thought processes, just like you're assessing somebody else's. And now you know how to maneuver yourself when you're in different situations. So Belle built a legendary career in a world that was not built for her. It wasn't built for her as a Black woman. It wasn't built for her as a woman, but she did it by holding on to the 3 things that every woman needs: expertise, awareness, and self-understanding. And we can't always change the conditions that we work in. We see that now, but we can strengthen what we bring to the table. And that's how Belle survived. That's how you can survive. That's how she won. And that's how you can win. So I want you to consider reading this book, The Personal Librarian. It is historical fiction, but it's based in truth. The authors share in the back the creative liberties that they took to keep the story going, but it is mostly true. And it shows the story of this woman who was able to really make a name for herself and do some incredible things in a world that was not set up for her to survive. So in this time where everything is just all over the place, it's challenging to look around. I mean, it's 2025 right now, the end of 2025, and layoffs have happened all over the place. But there's still a chance for you to figure out who you are, figure out what it is that you know, and set yourself up for success. So you can do, if Belle can do this in the 1890s, the early 1900s, surely you and I can do this today in 2025. If you are If you like this commentary, I would love for you to like, subscribe, and share my video. I also have a book club that I would love for you to be a part of. This is a safe space where we can talk and share what it is to be a woman, a Black woman in this period. Because I know there are things that we want to say, there are things that I want to say that I don't necessarily want to be in these YouTube streets. But inside the book club, it's a private, safe space where we can talk and share. So I would love for you to join the membership and talk with me there. If you have any thoughts or comments about the book, about this commentary, I would love to hear them. So I look forward to seeing your comments. Peace.